I didn't start gardening to make a statement. It was just peaceful, therapeutic. After losing my job in the city and moving out to a quieter neighborhood in the hills, I needed something to keep me grounded. So I started small, herbs, tomatoes, a few squash plants, and before I knew it, my backyard had turned into a full-on mini farm. The neighbors even called it the jungle, but always with a smile, or so I thought. See, this was the kind of community where people waved politely from behind their fences, where everything was supposed to look the same lawns, same mailboxes, same bland flower beds. So when my garden started getting a little too lush, it didn't just stand out, it became a problem. But I never expected what came next. One Thursday morning, I walked outside to check on my cucumbers, only to find half of them gone. Tomatoes snipped clean off the vine, carrots yanked from the ground, soil still clinging to their roots. At first, I thought it was animals, maybe raccoons or some bold deer, but then I saw the footprints. Human, and not just one set. That's when I found a notice taped to my front door, a polite little letter with the HOA's logo in the corner. Thank you for your contribution to our new Community Harvest Initiative. It read, "We've taken the liberty of sharing your crops with our residents for this weekend's farmers market. Please continue to grow for the collective good." I swear, I stood there in my pajamas, clutching that letter, thinking, what the hell? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what you would have done in my shoes. Because me, I didn't get mad, not right away. I got even. At first, I tried to be reasonable. I really did. I marched right down to the HOA office, letter in hand, still wearing dirt-stained boots from the garden. The receptionist, Pam, I think her name was, barely looked up when I walked in, just gave me that tight-lipped smile and motioned toward the clipboard to sign in. Real step-forward vibes. When I finally sat down with the president, a woman named Lila Pennington, she didn't even pretend to be apologetic. "Oh, we just assumed you'd be thrilled," she said, like it was some kind of compliment. "Everyone's been raving about your produce. You're such a natural giver." I told her straight that was theft, but Lila just raised her perfectly manicured eyebrows and started flipping through her binder of bylaws. "According to Section 14C," she said, tapping the page with her pen, "any landscape improvements extending beyond basic ornamental maintenance may be subject to community resource allocation if deemed beneficial by the board." She smiled again. "Your garden qualifies." I felt my pulse spike. "You mean to tell me," I asked, barely keeping my voice steady, "that because I grow too much food, you think it's okay to just come take it?" "It's for the community," she replied, like that made it better. I left that meeting with a fake smile and a silent vow. They wanted to turn my backyard into some kind of neighborhood pantry? Fine, let them help themselves. Because the next round of vegetables was going to come with a little surprise. Something to make their precious farmers market unforgettable. I swung by the pharmacy that night, picked up a few bottles of extra-strength laxatives, and smiled at the cashier like I was prepping for a cleanse. In a way, I didn't go nuclear right away. No, this needed planning, patience, timing. I started by planting a new round of veggies, zucchinis, peppers, eggplants, all in the front beds where the HOA patrols would be sure to see them. I made it look like I was playing along, being the good little gardener. Meanwhile, I kept my real crops in the back, out of view. The trick was in the irrigation. I dissolved the laxatives into a few batches of compost tea, organic, of course, and soaked only the front plants. Not enough to hurt anyone, just enough to guarantee that anyone who helped themselves would feel it later. And let's be honest, they deserved it. You don't just steal from someone's land and call it sharing. 2 weeks later, I got the next letter. "Thank you for your continued support of our community harvest. Your produce will be featured at this Sunday's HOA Wellness Picnic." I almost laughed out loud. The irony was delicious. Sunday rolled around, and I stayed home, didn't go near the park. But I could hear it. Laughter, music, the clink of mason jars. Then, around 2 p.m., a noticeable silence. I peeked out just in time to see folks speed walking, not strolling, down the sidewalks. Some were clutching their stomachs. Others had the look of full-blown regret on their faces. One poor guy, a board member, no less, barely made it into a neighbor's azalea bush before nature took its course. I kid you not. By sunset, the group chat was lit up with mystery illness theories. Bad potato salad, a virus, allergies. Nobody wanted to admit they'd raided my garden again, but they all knew. And me? I sat on the porch, sipping lemonade, pruning the untainted tomatoes in the back like nothing happened. Because sometimes karma needs a little fertilizer. I figured that would be the end of it. Lesson learned, right? They got their stomach aches. I got my dignity back, and we could all go back to ignoring each other like proper suburban neighbors. But no, apparently that wasn't enough. The very next day, Lila herself came knocking. I opened the door to find her standing there in full pastel power suit mode, flanked by 2 other board members with matching clipboards. They looked like a trio of judgmental flamingos. Lila had that tight smile again, but her eyes weren't smiling at all. "We've received reports," she said, voice clipped, "that your garden may be a source of gastrointestinal distress." "Oh," I said, feigning surprise. "You think it was a kale?" She didn't laugh. Instead, she launched into some nonsense about food safety standards and unregulated distribution. She even had the audacity to suggest I might need to remove my garden altogether if it posed a health risk to the neighborhood. I blinked. "You mean the garden you've been stealing from?" That cracked one of the clipboard guys. He looked down, clearly trying not to laugh. Lila didn't budge. "We're conducting an investigation," she said. "And in the meantime, we expect full cooperation." It took everything in me not to slam the door right in her face. Instead, I smiled sweetly and told her she was welcome to test anything she liked, as long as she brought a warrant. The clipboard stiffened. Lila's nostrils flared. She left without another word, but I could feel it in the air. The war had officially begun. They thought I was just some eccentric plant guy with a hoe and a hobby. But what they didn't know was that I had time. And when someone tries to take what's yours under the name of community, you fight back, root and stem. Turns out, HOA people don't just get mad, they get organized. By Thursday, they put up laminated signs along the sidewalk next to my property. Notice, ongoing health risk investigation. Do not consume produce from this area. Like I was growing black market spinach or something. I watched from the window, coffee in hand, as neighbors paused to read the signs. Some crossed the street. One guy, Dan, I think, actually took a picture like he'd stumbled onto a crime scene. It stung more than I expected. I'd moved here to get away from the noise, the suspicion, the eyes always watching you, and somehow I was right back in it. But I didn't fold. I got smart. That night, I pulled out the little security cameras I'd been meaning to install since last fall. Set one up on the back fence, one pointed toward the side gate, and a third camouflaged in an old birdhouse out front. I didn't know what I was looking for, but my gut told me something was coming, and I was right. 2 nights later, 1:37 a.m., according to the timestamp, I caught movement on the footage. 3 figures, all in dark hoodies, slipping to the gate like they'd done it before. One held a garbage bag. Another had gardening gloves. They weren't there to steal this time. They were there to sabotage. I watched them stomp through my beds, yank out rows of lettuce, and smear what looked like mud, or worse, across my trellises. One of them spray-painted a big red X on my garden shed. Another flicked something into my compost bin. They were in and out in 5 minutes. But that was all I needed. I had them, on camera, in my yard, destroy my property. So the next morning I baked a pie. It wasn't a peace offering. Let's be clear on that. The pie was strategic. Pecan, my best one. I boxed it up, scribbled for the HOA, with love, and left it right there on the HOA office doorstep. No note, no explanation. Just flaky, sweet confusion wrapped in a bow. Then I went home and waited. I wasn't expecting a confession, but word travels fast in a neighborhood full of retired tattletales. By sunset, the group chat was buzzing again, this time about inappropriate behavior escalating into threats. Apparently, someone accused me of poisoning the pie. Lila didn't eat a bite, just threw away and warned the whole board to avoid further interactions. I smiled, let them spin, but while they panicked over baked goods, I took my footage straight to the police station. The officer at the front desk barely raised an eyebrow when I explained trespassing, vandalism, destruction of property. I pulled up the video on my phone. "Recognize anyone?" he asked. I paused the frame and zoomed in. "You tell me," I said, pointing. "That's Greg from 2 doors down. And I'm pretty sure that's Marissa from the HOA social committee. Her walk is kinda memorable." He sighed. "You got something here. I'll file the report, but off the record, these HOA disputes usually fizzle before anyone wants to press charges." "That's fine," I said. "I'm not pressing charges yet." He gave me a look, half warning, half respect, and nodded, but I wasn't done. "See, the thing about power is that it only works when everyone believes in it. And once cracks start to show, it crumbles fast. So I printed flyers, just a few dozen, each with a still shot from the video, faces clearly visible under the headline. Garden raiders or community leaders? And I passed them out at the next HOA meeting. That next HOA meeting was supposed to be about lawn fertilization schedules and fence paint guidelines. Real thrilling stuff. But not this time. I showed up early, took a seat in the back, and waited until the president started droning on about spring decor policies. Then I stood up, quietly, casually, and handed a stack of flyers to the person next to me. "Thought folks should see this," I said. Within 5 minutes, the room turned into a pressure cooker. People murmured. A few gasped. Someone dropped their reusable water bottle. On each fly was a full-color screenshot of late-night sabotage. 3 familiar faces in hoodies mid-stomp, red spray paint in hand. And underneath, their names, printed in discreet little font, courtesy of a neighbor with a very talkative ring cam. Lila froze mid-sentence. "These images are doctored," she said, her voice too high, too tight. "This is slander. They're from my security cameras." I replied calmly, "Unedited. Time-stamped. Want me to play the footage?" A man in the front row, somebody's dad, judging by the socks and sandals combo, raised his hand and said, "Is that Greg?" "That's Greg, right?" Greg, seated 2 rows up, went pale. He didn't speak, just slowly lowered his head, and the tide shifted, because up until now, the HOA had painted me as the problem, the lone weirdo, the defiant gardener, the one who wouldn't share. But now the story had changed. Now I was the one with receipts, with truth, and the board, they were the ones in hoodies, crawling around in the dark, ruining what they claimed to protect. Someone stood up and called for a special vote to review board conduct and investigate misuse of authority. Lila tried to shut it down, but nobody was listening to her anymore. They called an emergency session, but it felt more like a trial. The next Saturday, the rec center was packed. More people than I'd ever seen give a damn about HOA business. Folks who never showed up to meetings were suddenly leaning on folding chairs, arms crossed, waiting to see what kind of circus this would be. And I came prepared. I brought a folder thick with screenshots, timestamps, and a written statement detailing every incident, from the unauthorized crop raids to the sabotage. I handed it all to the acting chair, since Lila had temporarily stepped back from her duties, and stood before the room like I was defending the last patch of earth on the planet. "My garden isn't just a hobby," I told them. "It's mine. It's something I built after everything else in my life fell apart. You all took from it without asking. And when I push back, you try to ruin it. You call that community." A few people looked down at their shoes. I let that hang for a second before finishing. "I've got no problem sharing. But there's a difference between generosity and being robbed blind." When Greg finally stood to speak, his voice shook. "I was told it was board approved," he mumbled. "Lila said we were enforcing code." Marissa didn't say anything at all, just slipped out the back halfway through. The vote to suspend the board passed, loudly. New elections were called for. An ethics committee was proposed. People were talking like the neighborhood had survived a scandal instead of caused one. But the best part? The flyers were still being passed around days later. Someone even turned one into a fridge magnet. Garden raiders or community leaders, had become a bit of a neighborhood joke, and I finally got my piece. For now. After that vote, everything changed, but not all at once. There was still tension in the air, like the smell of rain long after storm. Some neighbors avoided eye contact when we crossed paths on the sidewalk. Others gave awkward little nods, like they weren't sure if I was a villain or the guy who just refused to get pushed around. Honestly, I didn't care. I'd earned my quiet. The garden bounced back faster than I thought it would. I replanted the beds they'd trampled, scrubbed the spray paint off my shed, and installed motion sensor lights that lit up like a stadium if anyone so much as looked at my kale the wrong way. Every sprout felt like a win. And the best part? People started asking, not taking. Little handwritten notes tucked under my doormat. Any spare rosemary? My kid loved your cherry tomatoes. Can we trade zucchini? That I could live with. That was real community. Lila never showed her face again. Word was she'd moved out of state to be closer to family. The HOA operated under an interim board for a while, and then surprisingly, they asked me to join. I laughed out loud when I got the email. I declined, of course. Not because I wasn't flattered, but because I'd rather dig holes in the dirt than sit in a room arguing about mailbox paint. Still, it felt good to be asked. A month after the chaos settled, I threw a backyard cookout. Nothing fancy, just grilled veggies, lemonade, and mismatched lawn chairs. People came. They brought side dishes, folding tables, even mismatched forks. And they stayed. We sat under string lights and fireflies, eating food that came straight out of the same dirt someone once tried to steal. And for the first time since moving here, I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt like home. It's funny how something so simple, like a few stolen vegetables, can unravel everything and rebuild it in a completely different shape. When I first moved out here, I just wanted space. Quiet. Maybe some peace after the noise of my old life. What I didn't expect was to end up in a standoff with pastel-clad pirates who called themselves a homeowner's board. But looking back now, I'm weirdly grateful. That garden, those early mornings with dirt under my nails, the hours spent pulling weeds and coaxing life in the soil, it gave me more than food. It gave me purpose. Something solid I could grow and protect. And when people tried to take it from me, that's when I learned who I really was. Not someone passive. Not someone afraid. I became someone who fights back. And maybe, just maybe, that's what this place needed all along. Since the blow-up, things have been quieter. Not perfect. This is still suburbia, after all, but different. Kinder. People knock now. They ask. They share too. Someone even dropped off a basket of peaches with a sticky note. No laxatives, promise. I laughed so hard I nearly cried. That little war reminded us what community is supposed to be, not control, not committees with too much power, but actual connection, boundaries with respect, a give and take that doesn't start with taking. Every season now, I host a plant and plate night. Neighbors bring dishes made with what they've grown. We eat, we laugh, and we trade cutting seeds. Stories. Even a guy who once ripped up my carrots brought a jar of pickled okra. We're still working on forgiveness, but we're getting there. And every time I plant a new seed, I think about what bloomed from a mess. Sometimes the best kind of justice isn't revenge. It's roots.